Hello and Assalamu alaikum. In today's lecture, we're going to discuss about components. What is a component? As you use Figma for designing applications or website, you will soon find yourself duplicating things again and again, and you'll see how you keep on changing these things. This is incredibly annoying and just a complete waste of time. Luckily, in Figma, we have something called components. I usually think component as a template for different elements that you want to reuse. Here is an example of this button. This is a component and I have reused it in all of these screens multiple times. When you create a component, this is called the parent component, and when you reuse it into your screens, it is called the child component or instance. So here is the parent component and these are its child. And when you create a component, for example, this is the component and it has this state. So when you click on the component, it will change to this state. Now I will click over here and it's changing. And the same property is applied to every one of these. Now let's have a closer look. Now that's the parent component, and on the screen you see these are the instance. So what if the designer wants to change the color of this component? So you don't have to click each of these and change its color. You will just select the parent, go on and change its color, and they will dynamically change just like this. And how that is done? Let's learn that. In Figma UI, on top left, you have two panels, layers and assets. If you go to the assets panel, you can see all your components here. As you can see, there is a button and there are icon components as well. The slideshow that I have shown was also a component, and there you can see the example of the button is also a component here. I can grab any of these into my canvas just like this, and we have a component with all its properties in the right side panel. We will get into these in a bit. The second step here is to look at the variants. What are variants and how do they relate to the component? So if we want this button to have different states, that's when we create the variants. For example, that's the button and it's been used into a form, and all the fields of form is empty, not filled. That's when the button is going to be disabled. So we will have this state for a disabled button. As soon as you fill all the fields, the button is going to change its state to be the original one. And when you hover it, it will have this glow effect, and when you press on it, it will be this solid color. So one button can have different state. When you click on this icon, we create the variants of the component. Now let's look a bit closer at the component properties, because component properties allow us to minimize the number of variants that we create. You can imagine how big a canvas of component variants could become if we have to create variants of everything. Well, that's where the component properties help us. So what is a component property? If I target this button here, I will select it. Okay, in my right side, you can see these are the properties of this button. So here it has state, to state. This is the default state. I can change its state to hover if I want. Here you can see the text. I can change the text of this button to whatever I want. Click. I can also change the icon that is present into the button. So here the property is called icon. I can click here and I can choose the other icon, or I can completely disable the icon if I don't want it, or maybe I just want the icon, I don't want the text. This is the power of component properties, because if we had to create component variants for each of these instances, the number of components we would have be much larger. Now we're going to recreate this button together. Now the first thing that we have to do is create a text layer. I will call it button. Now I'm going to frame this selection. Right click and then frame. We're going to give this a background color. Let's say purple. And I'm going to put an auto layout on it, this frame. We will learn about auto layout in the next lecture. For now, let's just focus on the component. Let's make the button round from here. Okay, so that's our button. Let's just call it button. Up here on the top and click this button to create the component. And we have our first button component. From this we can also add the variants. Let's just click here and we have a variant of it. But right now they both look the same, but we want them to be different. So for example, this is going to be the default state, or this is going to be the hovered state. So if I click here, I go into the right side, there you can see the property 1. We're going to change it to state, and we're going to let it be default. And this one we want it to have the hovered state, hovered. So I think the default we're going to have no fill color and maybe a stroke. So this one is the default and this one is the hovered. You can see the states are changing over here. Now we have two variants of a single button. Now if you go here into the assets, we can see our newly created button is also here and it has two variants. So if I grab and drag here, this button can be used anywhere. The first thing we can add is a dynamic way for us to change the content. In this case, the text content in the button. I will select both of these text from our variants, and if I go to the right panel and there is this icon here, this is the way for us to create the component property. Create text property, it says. So if I click it, name text and the value button, fine. Now I will create a property. I'm going to click the parent component. I'm going to copy it and I'm going to create an instance. So if I click here, you can see it has now two properties. I can change its state to hovered and I can change its text to anything I want. Fine. Let's just go back. You can add different component properties. For example, if I select the text layer and in the layer it has this visibility, again we have this icon to create the property. So if we're going to create the property just like this, it's going to be show layers true. Let's say show text and make it true. Now I'm going to create this property. Okay, so if I click here, it has this property now, show text, and it's true. If I'm going to turn it off, the text is going to be gone. Alright, now we want to add an icon. From the assets panel, I'm going to drag this icon. I'm going to copy this icon, and here I'm going to paste it. We want the exact icon into the hover state as well. Now you can see how dynamically it changed into the instance. Now again, we want the same property for the icon to hide and show. We're going to select the icon from both of our variants, and we're going here into the right panel, and here is the icon property. Create the property, and we're going to call it show icon. Okay, and where here we have the property show icon. If I turn it off, it's not going to show the icon. If I want the icon and not the text, we just have the icon. Now the last thing that I want to show here is actually switching the type of icons. So if I'm going to select these two icons and I'm going to click on this icon, it says create instance swap property. I'm going to click this one. The name is instance, let's call it icon swap, and from here we can select as many icons as we want, but they have to be the component. So we have created two icon components. That's the one that we have used, and now I'm going to use this one. So now there are two icons here. I'm going to create the property. Let's see, this is the instance, and here we have the icon swap. I'm going to click the drop down menu, and I'm going to select this one, and the icon is changed. So now you can use this button into your whole website or application as many times as you want, and you can choose these properties and you can just toggle them. You can work with them. You can just show the icon, you can just show the text, you can change its state, you can make it call whatever it want, and that's how we create a component. Alright, thank you so much for watching, and best of luck.